She was just a teenage girl from a small French village. She could neither read nor write, yet she claimed to hear voices from God. Within 2 years, she commanded armies, lifted a siege, and turned the tide of a 100-year war. And by 19, she was burned alive at the stake. This is the incredible story of Joan of Arc, the girl who defied kings, armies, and the church itself. In this video, we follow Joan from her humble beginnings in Domremy to her visions and rise as a warrior saint. You'll see how she convinced hardened generals, changed the fate of France, and how betrayal and politics sealed her fate. Stay to discover why her story continues to inspire soldiers, saints, and ordinary people more than 600 years later. Joan of Arc was born in 1412 in the small village of Domremy in northeastern France. Her family were simple peasants, owning a few acres of land and some livestock. France at the time was torn apart by the Hundred Years' War against England. Large parts of the country were devastated, and northern France was under English and Burgundian control. From an early age, Joan was deeply religious. She spent hours in church, learning prayers by heart. At the age of 13, she reported hearing voices and seeing visions. She claimed that Saint Michael, Saint Catherine, and Saint Margaret spoke to her, commanding her to support the Dauphin Charles, the rightful heir to the French throne, and help drive out the English. At first, her family dismissed these visions as childish imagination. But Joan insisted. She said God had chosen her, not priests or nobles, to save France. By 1428, Joan could no longer ignore the voices. She traveled to Vaucouleurs, a nearby town loyal to Charles, and demanded to be taken to the Dauphin. The local commander, Robert de Baudricourt, laughed at her. A teenage girl claiming divine mission sounded absurd. But Joan's determination impressed the townspeople. Eventually, Baudricourt agreed. Joan cut her hair short, dressed in male soldiers' clothing, and set out on a dangerous 11-day journey through enemy territory. She carried a letter demanding safe passage, and against all odds, she reached Chinon, where Charles was staying. There, she was tested. Charles disguised himself among courtiers to see if Joan could recognize him. Without hesitation, she walked straight to him, bowed, and declared, "God sends me to you to reclaim your kingdom." The Dauphin was astonished, but before trusting her, church officials examined her for heresy, witchcraft, and even her virginity. She passed every test. By early 1429, Joan was given a small army to lead to the besieged city of Orléans. The siege of Orléans had dragged on for months. The English surrounded the city, cutting off supplies. Morale was collapsing. Then Joan arrived. She wore white armor and carried a banner painted with the image of Christ and angels. She did not wield a sword in battle. Her weapon was inspiration. Soldiers, exhausted and hopeless, found new courage in her presence. The Maid of Orléans, they called her. She insisted on confession and prayer before battle, uniting hardened fighters under faith. On May 7, 1429, Joan led a daring assault on the English fortifications. She was struck by an arrow in the shoulder, but returned to the fight. Her courage was contagious. By May 8, the siege was lifted. Orléans was free. News of the miracle spread like wildfire. For the first time in years, France believed victory was possible. After Orléans, Joan pressed Charles to march north toward Reims, the traditional site of French coronations. Many generals hesitated, fearing powerful English garrisons along the way. But Joan's conviction was unshakable. "I am sent to crown the king at Reims." The march became a procession of victories. One by one, towns opened their gates to Joan's army. Her presence seemed to turn the tide wherever she went. By July 1429, Charles entered Reims. In the cathedral, With Joan standing proudly by his side, he was crowned King Charles VII. For Joan, this was the fulfillment of her mission. She had taken a hopeless prince and made him a crowned king. The Maid had delivered what she promised. But Joan's triumph did not last. After the coronation, politics returned. Charles hesitated to press the war further. His advisers, jealous of Joan's influence, urged caution. Joan, however, wanted to drive the English completely out of France. In 1430, she led a small force to defend Compiègne against a Burgundian attack. During the battle, she was thrown from her horse and captured. Unlike a noble knight, she could not be ransomed. Instead, she was sold to the English. Her enemies were determined to destroy her reputation. They accused her of witchcraft, heresy, and cross-dressing. For months she was interrogated by theologians in Rouen. Joan, still only 18, defended herself with remarkable courage. When asked if she was in God's grace, she famously answered, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God so keep me." But the verdict was predetermined. On May 30th, 1431, Joan was led to the marketplace of Rouen. Thousands gathered to witness her execution. She wore a simple white dress and carried a cross. Tied to the stake, she asked for a crucifix to be held high so she could see it as the flames rose. Witnesses said she cried the name of Jesus until the very end. She was 19 years old. Her ashes were scattered in the sand to prevent her followers from collecting relics. But her death had the opposite effect. It made her a martyr. Even her English executioners admitted they feared they had burned a saint. Joan of Arc's death was not the end of her story. Within 25 years, the tide of war turned. By 1453, the English were driven out of France, except for Calais. Charles VII owed his crown in large part to the girl he had abandoned. In 1456, a new trial ordered by the Pope declared Joan innocent. She was cleared of all charges, her execution deemed a miscarriage of justice. Centuries later, her legend grew. She became a symbol of French unity and courage, celebrated in songs, plays, and paintings. In 1920, nearly 500 years after her death, the Catholic Church canonized Joan of Arc as a saint. Today, she stands as one of the most iconic figures in world history. A teenage girl who believed in her mission so deeply that she changed the fate of a nation. Joan of Arc's life lasted only 19 years, but her story echoes across centuries. She began as a peasant girl and ended as a martyr, a soldier, and a saint. Her courage reminds us that determination can rise from the humblest origins. Her faith shows that conviction can challenge even kings and armies. And her sacrifice proves that some legends are forged not in victory, but in fire. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more untold tales of the people who shaped our world.